I hate this movie with an absolute burning passion. For some cultural context, Mulan is sort of like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table when it comes to Chinese legends, and it helps that the ballad isn't particularly very long. What I just showed you was around 1 2/3 slides of this at 18-point font. It really isn't long, and that means it is flexible for being retold for every single dynasty and every single generation after the original telling in like the Northern Wei dynasty. So every generation has their own version of Mulan, including one that was made for China during World War II when they were struggling against the Japanese Empire. So, how I generally view the 1998 Disney version is that I say it's a well told story even if there are cultural inaccuracies. The presence of cultural inaccuracies doesn't make it a terrible movie. Hercules, for example, absolutely butchered the Greek myth, but it's a well told story. Honestly, I think it's a better Superman story than Man of Steel. Yes, I consider Hercules by Disney to be a better Man of Steel movie than Man of Steel. Honestly, they should just hire whoever did the Disney's Hercules if they ever want to make a Superman musical. But as for the 2020 Mulan movie, let's get into it. It opens with a young Mulan practicing martial arts in a field as her father narrates how chi is for boys. Many other commenters have pointed out that this is not how chi works and it's kind of distracting. I thought this was common knowledge, but apparently chi is just something you're born with, not cultivated, not channeled. I will say I'm open to the idea of changing things up so long as they pay off, but this does not pay off at all. It's very unsatisfying. Then we see Kid Mulan chase a chicken and do some gymnastics over the hole too low. Then we cut to the Silk Road. After possessing a Silk Road trader, we see the Rorans attack an outpost. That same trader, who apparently is ambiguously possessed, I don't know, maybe she just subsumes their bodies like Muzan Kibutsuji, just turns into the witch and starts making mincemeat out of the soldiers who are guarding the outpost. Then we see Bori Khan and the horde of Rorans run up this wall, but the witch and the Rorans leave one surviving soldier, or rather the witch possesses the one surviving soldier, and we cut to Chang'an, Imperial City, even though it is clearly Chang'an. We meet the Emperor, and I am not sure why this witch decided to possess this soldier and just not, kill the Emperor right here. I mean, this is one of the things you need to account for when you're adding elements to this story, that while it did have fantastical elements in the original, is generally a very structured and more grounded in terms of the supernatural elements. When you're adding something like a witch, you need to consider how this witch affects the plot. And apparently, the Disney remake's philosophy is you can add whatever you want so long as it never affects the actual general plot. Even though this changes a bunch of things, it still keeps the structure for the most part up until the climax. Then she goes to Bori Khan to give him a report and claims that she can tear him to pieces before he blinks. You doing that and taking over as the big bad Khatan of the Rorans probably would make this movie a lot better. You probably killing the Emperor and just ending the credits there probably would make the movie much better. But we do not live in that world. Instead, we have to cut to Mulan, now grown up. She's watching a male and female rabbit running side by side. Not sure why she has to comment on the whole, they're running side by side. I think one of them was male and the other was female. Because it kind of defeats the whole point of the original ballad's ending. Two rabbits running side by side, you can't exactly tell which one is male or female. Great job, movie, great job. Okay, time for the matchmaker bit. Anyways, Mulan's sister freaks out over a spider and Mulan catches the china. Then she drops them. There's a metaphor somewhere in here for China and how this movie performed in China. Almost immediately after that scene with the matchmaker and how the matchmaker goes, dishonor, dishonor, we get the conscription order sequence. Okay, I have a few questions here. Why was there no reflection? I don't mean the song, but I mean just a reflection in general on what just happened. Okay, you know how this goes. Mulan takes up the order, and in the absolute no emotional moment scene ever, she just really just turns around and has the armor and leaves with the conscription order. Mulan arrives at the camp, gets into a camp fight that's broken up by the commanding officer played by Donnie Yen. Then she volunteers for night guard duty just to not end up exposed in front of all the men. And then we get the training montage. No actual awesome music, we just get that montage and then a Roran attack. We get another poorly done fight scene, because of course this movie needs poorly done fight scenes up the wazoo. It's time for actual battle. This is the face of boredom and not a warrior ready for battle. This is also her face for every other emotion that exists in some kind of emotional spectrum. Okay, so we get another poorly edited fight scene, because that's all this movie can seemingly offer. So Gong Li's character tells Mulan she's holding herself back, and Mulan gets the inspiration to discard her armor and charge off into battle as her true self. She rejoins the battle just in time for the witch to start forcing soldiers into shield walls by turning into swarms of birds and just pelting them from all directions. This makes them easy pickings for the Roran siege engines to simply blast them into oblivion. So Mulan's solution is to shoot them a bunch of times with bows and arrows, and then hope that they can turn around thinking that there's a backup force behind them. She uses the helmets in order to give the illusion that they are actually a larger force and not a smaller one, and they buy the deception and causes the avalanche themselves. Okay, I liked it better when Mulan caused the avalanche rather than just deceive her way into having the Rorans be stupid and cause an avalanche to destroy their own army. Rather than just simply revealing her deception from her injuries in battle like a warrior would, because, of course, the original actually gets injured in battle and actually pays in blood, sweat, and tears, while this Mulan sorta just stumbles about. She gets expelled, you know the drill. Then the bird witch goes on and says, "We're not so different. They persecuted me for my chi. I'm telling you Bori Khan's evil plan because I don't like him as we previously established." So Mulan goes to report Bori Khan's evil plan to her commanders, who actually end up buying it because they needed convincing. Time for a duel between the Emperor and Bori Khan. So in a sequence of events that I'm just going to gloss over, Mulan makes it to the palace. As the Emperor has already left, she instead finds Gong Li's witch character. I think the original was named Hayabsa, which is Japanese for falcon, but honestly, I don't care about this character enough to learn the actual name they gave her. Meanwhile, Bori Khan is monologuing about how the Son of Heaven has nobody to help him, and mwahahaha, I'm so evil. Hayabsa reveals her treachery to him, and then she dies a rather pointless death. Poorly done fight scene that's supposed to be our climax. Poorly done arrow kick later. Look, the original Mulan voice actress is in a cheap dress. Mulan returns home, gets honored, gets a new sword, blah blah blah, gets told, "Hey, I want you to reconsider the whole Imperial Guard offer bit." The frickin' end. Obviously, my opinion on this movie isn't positive. Let's get the easy stuff out of the way first. Fight scenes are absolute garbage. The fight scenes in this film are edited like a film student who is trying to cover up either a lack of effort or a failure of choreography by adding cuts. These cuts do not help this film at all. It is these very cuts that make the fight scenes in this film completely and utterly incomprehensible. The cardinal sin of any fight scene is as follows. If you are making an action flick, and your action scenes suck, then you have failed. It is like getting your king in chess taken. If you lose the king, it does not matter how many pawns, bishops, rooks, queens, or anything else you have on the board. You lose the king, you lose the whole game. The other pieces serve no purpose. You have failed. So, I can go on about how awful the fight scenes are. These cuts are terrible. The Chinese army looks small. The Imperial City, where all this action is taking place during the climax, looks empty. There are so many technical issues with this movie that they're not worth going over, because I am probably not qualified to go on about the cinematography or how the extras are just plain standing around, because that would just be nitpicking at this point, so I'm not going to do it. If I wanted to nitpick, I would. So let's talk about the characters, starting with the title character herself. The story which they are using as a basis is antithetical to the characterization they gave Mulan. In this movie, they gave her chi, which is treated like a magical force. The story, which was the basis for this one, had Mulan bitterly work to get what she wanted. The characterization of Mulan in the 1998 film is a better example of filial piety than anything the remake could have thrown at us, and I don't think she said the words filial piety, or how this movie translated it, this being the 2020 movie, devotion to family. The 1998 Mulan had you empathize with the pain she experienced during the I'll make a man out of you sequence. The 1998 Mulan is a girl who skirted with death from battlefield injuries in order to save someone who was most definitely going to die on the battlefield because of his age and his health. That is powerful, and I buy it because the movie sells it very well. This Mulan, however, wouldn't even find herself at home in a high school play. She wouldn't even find herself at home in a middle school play, because her actress has the same blank look in every damn scene. Having a weaker main character can work for some stories. Murder mysteries, for example, rely heavily on stock characters in order to sell the scenario. However, this movie doesn't have an interesting scenario to sell, like a mystery. It has no compelling plot, because the plot requires you to actually care about the characters and not the scenario they're in. I challenge anyone to just name the people in her supporting cast right here. Stripping away the animation also stripped away a ton of means of characterization. You can have several different body types, ways characters are animated in order to prove a point. You can have many slapstick-style gags and exaggerations in order to give personality to background extras. This movie does not have that, and it's not helped by one of the characters, Li Shang, being broken into two different characters. And to compound these issues with characters and characterization, this movie runs into another issue. Remember that matchmaking scene where Mulan ends up destroying the tea sets? You're not getting reflection after the matchmaker scene. You're not having her break down. You're not having her do anything of that sort that makes her feel vulnerable at all. Why? Because you can't show Mulan as weak in this film. Because the power was always within her. Well, power exists within everyone. People just usually go through an arc where they're able to tap into that inner strength. But no, all she has to do is power of belief, and she gets that narrative second wind. But that's not the biggest issue with how this goes down. All Mulan and her sister do afterwards? Well, they walk out, matchmaker goes dishonor, 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 and no reflection. We need to get through the conscription order sequence. Why? Because that is the fundamental philosophy of any Disney remake. Disney remakes want to go through a checklist of scenes in order to get them out. A cheap cash grab. No need for subtlety. And when they do change things, they want to change things in order to make it more palatable for the modern audiences. Story be damned. Disney's Pinocchio remake, for example. Pinocchio is a tale about a puppet who learns to be human. He does something wrong and gets punished for it, or deals with the consequences of his actions. The remake sucked all that out, because you can't have the main character be too naughty because that hurts marketability. For the Little Mermaid remake, they cut out an entire verse from Poor Unfortunate Souls. This is what that verse said. The men up there don't like a lot of blabber. They think a girl who gossips is a bore. Yet on land it's much preferred for ladies not to say a word. And after all, dear, what's idle prattle for? So, basically, the whole presence of sexism, from a villain, mind you, makes it less marketable. Any bad ism out there, like racism or sexism, is treated the same way, whether it's coming out of a hero's mouth or a villain's mouth. Because racism and sexism aren't marketable unless you're Twitter. So probably when Disney gets to remaking Hunchback and Tangled, Frollo probably won't hate Romani and is just genocidal towards everybody with a pulse that's not him, I guess. And Mother Gothel is just going to be some witch who is going to be a last-minute twist villain because you can't show her gaslighting Rapunzel and mistreating her that way. Where was I? Oh yes, characters. You gotta make room for this witch, and somehow I've heard people say she's the only good thing about this movie, and after rewatching this crappy film, can someone tell me why? She really does not fit into the story they want to tell. Not to mention, it doesn't really explore the themes of, oh, you were impersonating a guy, you were accepted, because warrior chi is for guys, but when I do the same things you do, I get told I'm a witch and run out with torches and pitchforks. Just saying, you could have done a lot more with this. But no, she fights and taunts Mulan, goes, we're not so different, acts ambiguously on Bori Khan's orders, betrays Bori, and dies a rather pointless death. This death is my problem with this character in the film, and another microcosm of the whole Disney remake issue. The general structure of the original means that there's not a lot of wiggle room. You are stuck to that structure, and that structure will consume the whole plot. No matter how many changes you make, you are only allowed to beat on the walls of the box that is the original's plot. You're not allowed to diverge that much in any given way, or in any meaningful way, because you can diverge a lot, but not have meaning. See what I mean? She's a viable threat, yet she bites the dust in a very mundane manner because the structure of this plot refuses to do anything about it. Everything will end with a confrontation of the Emperor. How is up for debate, but how cannot deviate too much from the original. Then again, I think people like her because she's both competently acted and an actual character with mildly decent interactions. I say decent interactions because the characters she's dealing with are either poorly acted, poorly written, or both. Great job, Disney, scraping the bottom of the barrel. Overall, I want to know who on earth were they pandering to when they made this movie. If you're trying to draw the wuxia audience or the action flick audiences, I'm sorry, both action movies and wuxia movies require fight scenes that need to be competent. You can't cover up your bad fight choreography with a bunch of cuts. That just makes the action terrible and people will just want to leave. If you were wanting to pander to Chinese audiences, you took a lot of liberties. Other people, way more qualified than me, already commented on this. And I have to say, even outside those cultural inaccuracies, I want to know why the Chinese audience in the first place, because, again, Mulan is like King Arthur. She has a lot of tales told about her. And those tales, many of which are made by the domestic Chinese audiences, why on earth would they want to go see a foreigner's film and see a foreigner try to sell their culture to them when they could just watch one of the millions, that's an exaggeration, but there are a lot, domestic Chinese movies about this character? And as for the Americans who grew up watching with this, they basically are looking at this, seeing the charm sucked out of it, and then the constant references to things like reflection, making men out of you. It's just, why? Why are you reminding us of a better movie we could be watching? Those are just my thoughts. Please consider liking, subscribing, tipping the channel on Ko-fi. This is Cyril signing off.